Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to MyTutor and the online school, and welcome back to English. So today we are continuing along with poetry with our English literature. Today we're going to be looking at the comparison unseen question. So that's our 8 marker. We have looked at it before, but I think that was a couple of weeks ago now. So we're going to have another go at that today. And today we're going to look at a past paper one. Rather than sort of 2 poems that I found by myself. So I'm also going to flick through what the exam paper looks like, just because I think generally when you guys do mocks and sort of my experiences with not just English but other exams where you have a variety of topics that you could potentially study, and you only answer a few questions rather than the entire paper. So I'm just going to sort of quickly talk you guys through that, because I do know that there are I've heard horror stories, so I'm just going to make you guys aware of that. Looking through the exam paper, I'm sure most of you will be absolutely fine and you all know what you're doing, but just to double check, I'm going to just go through it with you. Right, so if you guys don't know me, I'm sure you all do. My name's Vicki. I did English language and linguistics at uni, did my PGCE last year, and I'm up to about 380 lessons on MyTutor now, I think. I'm looking forward to my 400th. I think when I get to 500, I'm going to have a party. Right, so where's what I want? I never know how to get rid of this banner when it pops up. Let's get rid of that. Oh, guys, remind me if I forget, because, you know, head like a sieve. I've brought up a load of books. You guys were asking for sort of recommendations yesterday. I've brought a load up with me, and I've also got my Waterstones order up in my email, so you can just see the books I've ordered, not sort of who I am, where I live, that sort of thing. If you're looking to sort of diversify the sort of books you're reading at the moment, I've picked up a load of books that have been really popular in the Black Lives Movement, so I'm going to show you what I've ordered, what I've got coming, and why I'm looking forward to reading them. And I've also just got general, I've tried to pick up a nice bunch of book recommendations. I've picked up some fiction and some non-fiction, so hopefully there's sort of a nice mix, because I think sort of with English we tend to plump for the fiction and we don't read much of non-fiction, and we've got an entire paper on non-fiction. So I've picked a few bits and pieces up. Most of them are sort of geeky sort of English language stuff. There's one on Shakespeare, but there's a couple of other bits which I think are quite interesting. So just to give you sort of a wider range of things that you might want to look at outside of the fictional classical world, essentially. So we are comparing and contrasting 2 poems today. So our 2 poems, one is called Autumn and one is called Today. Some of you might have looked these up before. It's past paper, it's out in the public domain, so you might have seen them, you might have had to go at them at school. So what do you think the themes of these poems are going to be? What sort of thing are you expecting to see just based on their titles? Season, yeah, foreshadowing, that's absolutely fine. If you've got questions which you're not sure of and you just want to pop them in, that's fine. I'll answer them as long as they're relevant. So foreshadowing is where you see something or read something in a book which you know is going to sort of forebode something good or bad happening. I'm just trying to find my Inspector Calls book. I don't know why I need to show you it, but I feel like a little YouTube vlogger when I show you my books. So Inspector Calls, so this is my copy. Inspector Calls is, there's a couple of foreshadowing bits right at the start. So if you guys have studied in Inspector Calls, you should know, or at least I might jog your memory. So there's a couple, the first one being, so this is set in 1912. The play was published 1947, somewhere around there, I think. Can I see it? Yeah, 1947. So it says there's not going to be a war. I don't know why everybody's worrying. That's Mr. Burling. Mr. Burling says there won't be a war. We all know as the audience that there is going to be a war. They're referring to World War I and things starting to bubble. So that's the first thing. And the other one is talking about the Titanic and saying that the Titanic is a great ship and it can't sink. So this is set in 1912. The Titanic went down mid-April in 1912. So it gives us a little bit of a time frame as to when in 1912. So it's written between January and sort of early April, essentially. So we know that the Titanic sinks and we know that World War I happens. So that foreshadows something bad is going to happen, and that being that the inspector arrives and sort of rakes up all of their past and personal history. So that's what foreshadowing is. Right, themes then. Season. Yeah, let's just have a look at these to start with. Evil of nature, brightness of nature. Yep, it is dramatic. It is dramatic irony as well, but it is also foreshadowing. Seasons, winter, summer, relay of life. That's nice. Nature, maybe love. Fabulous. Right, so I'll come back to sort of where I've bought the books. I think, to be honest with you, all of them have come from Waterstones. Right, currently studying All the Light We Cannot See in school, but I can't seem to find the foreshadowing in it. There is any included, as you probably will, as you teach it. I've never taught All the Light We Cannot See. I haven't heard of it either, which is poor. So I can't help you with that one, I'm afraid. But I will definitely go and look it up afterwards if I can remember to. Right, okay. I'm just writing that down so I'll go and look it up. Right, okay, so yeah, I think you guys have come up with some nice thoughts. So I've got a load of themes on my Mentimeter. So I'd like you guys to rank these themes in which you think are the most interesting, impactful, order of importance, that sort of thing. So I'll pop what you need in there. So this is completely up to you guys in terms of where you think everything sits. It's completely subjective. I'm just interested to see where you think which will be the most impactful. And before anybody asks, I've got a Kahoot at the end, so don't worry, there will be a quiz. Oh, this is really interesting. So nice to see so many of you jumping onto that. Nice to see so many of you jumping in. Right. Oh, hopefully, Olivia, that would have sorted itself out by now, because loads of peeps seem to be on it. Fab, thank you for letting me know, Olivia. Apologies, guys. I feel terrible every time I need to drink it. My sound horrible. This is really interesting. Right, so the same ones that seem to sort of be going sort of up and down seem to be loss, nature, crime, pain and suffering, and animals. Those seem to be the big ones towards the top, which is interesting. And I think probably looking at the poems that we're going to look at, I think those are pretty accurate in the ones that sort of are the strongest that come through. So that's super interesting. Right. How do I... right, okay, there we go. Right, so we'll leave it at that. So Nature at top, then pain and suffering, loss, crime, gratefulness, shifting mood, animals, excitement. Interesting stuff. Right, I'm going to leave that there for the time being and we shall come back to it. Right, so before we go off and look at our poems, let's just remind ourselves of sort of the expectations, what we need to be doing. So it's only 8 marks. It's the smallest question that you will be asked to answer in the entirety of your literature papers. It's not worth a lot. I've come across quite a few of my students in their mocks who tend to miss this one out because their time management isn't great and they write loads for their inspector calls and they write loads for their power and conflict or love and relationships. Then they get to their unseen and it's a bit of a rush. So definitely worth thinking about pacing yourself. Obviously it is only an 8 marker, so if you are going to miss out a question, it's the one to miss out. But I think it's quite easy to get 3 or 4 marks, which you might not get sort of in the bigger questions. You're, I think, much less likely the more you write for, if you write loads and loads and streams for the first 2 questions, so your scene poetry and your 20th century prose or plays, you're less likely to get an additional 3 or 4 marks, because if you write more and more, you're probably the quality is probably going to dwindle, which will stop you getting up those marks. So if you are thinking, where can I pick up some extra marks? Should I keep writing another paragraph or should I go on to the unseen poetry? My advice would be do the unseen poetry because it's easier to get 3-4 marks on the board. Right, so a little bit of advice then in terms of how to tackle them. So we have looked at this before, but I thought looking at key themes is a really nice way to directly compare them. So working out what the themes are, I mean, I've showed you guys flatters, tables, so definitely go off and use those if you want to in the exam, but it's a lot of work for very few marks. So just be wary of your time, essentially. Do it if you've got time. If not, try and pick out a couple of things. I would say if you're sort of rushing, themes are the one to go for. And then look for language devices and structural devices which show how that theme is being conveyed. I'm just getting out my answer for later on before I forget about it. So that's how I tackle this, particularly if you are in a rush and you need to get something on the paper because it is the last question on the exam for you guys. So my little bit emoji there looking cool. She looks much better than I ever do. Right, so I said I was going to quickly talk you through the layout of the English literature paper. You are absolutely, I'm happy for you guys to screenshot. Personally, I would get rid of my face because why would you want that? But, oh, self-deprecation this morning. Yeah, you're more than welcome to screenshot if you like. And if I whiz past something really quickly, you can always go over to YouTube when the sessions have been uploaded and you can screenshot there. I know someone asked me a couple of weeks ago, where can I print off all the resources? And you can't, but you can go off and screenshot or you can make your own notes, that sort of thing. So there are sort of ways around it effectively, but if you want a screenshot, I'm totally cool with that. So English literature paper 2, so it's your modern text and poetry. I think the slightly easier one, because I think you guys tend to get on better with the 20th and 21st century just because it's easier to understand language wise. So the thing to be wary with, and I know a lot of schools do this, my school definitely did this when I was sitting mock papers, was to print the entire question paper off rather than just giving you the questions for the books you were reading, because there are instances where people get into the exam, get really flustered and think, oh my goodness, I've got 27 questions to answer. You haven't, you've got 4. So I'm just going to run you through it quickly. I'm sure most of this you'll be like, oh my goodness, Vicky, we already know this, but for those of you who might not, and it tells you at the front, read the instructions if you're unsure. You've got time where you will be writing your candidate number, your centre number, and your name and all of that jazz. You've got time to read the instruction paper. So if you're panicking, just sit and read the instructions on the front. So you're answering one question from section A, one from section B, and both in section C. So your section A is your 20th century. Again, they give you, they break it down for you guys, which I think is quite nice. At the front, you've got a little contents page. So your section A, you are answering one of these. What is really nice is that they give you an option. It says either or. So what I quite like about this paper is that you've got two potential questions you could go over. So what you need to do is you need to flick over to the one that you've been studying. So most of you guys are doing inspector calls. And then you choose which question you want to do, and then you get cracking, and you ignore all the other ones in section A. I think the next most popular one is Blood Brothers. I have taught that one before. History Boys. I know some people study that at AS level, so I don't know whether that's changed since the curriculum changed. I'm a bit old, so never taught that one. Read DNA, but never taught that one either. Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night Time. Haven't heard of anybody doing that, and haven't heard of anybody doing A Taste of Honey. Lord of the Flies, the other popular one there. Haven't heard of anyone doing Telling Tales. Few doing Animal Farm, but not that many. Never Let Me Go. I haven't heard of anybody doing that. Any to Me, not that one. Or Pigeon English, haven't heard of anyone doing that as well. So you just need to choose one question for whichever you are writing. I've heard of students going into the exam and trying to write an answer for all the questions, or going in and going, I don't know which book I've studied, and answering the wrong question for the wrong text. So make sure you are writing the right number down in the margin in your question paper book, and make sure you are answering the ones that you've studied. I knew one pupil last year who had done Jekyll and Hyde, and he answered the A Christmas Carol. So be careful, it's not unheard of. And then section B, you've either got your love and relationships or your power and conflict. So choose the right one that you've been studying, and then everybody does section C. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. Right, so I've rattled on about that. Though you could put all the links of the resources in the chat so we could look at it afterwards, it would be really helpful. You're right, but all of them are saved onto my computer, so I don't have any links, and I don't think I can send any attachments, and that's not my choice. Yeah, I can't send any attachments to you guys, and things like Google Drive we're not allowed to use because we're not allowed to share our emails. Right, okay. Do you have to learn all the poems off by heart? So, right, Olivia, question number one. Are we going to go through exam technique? We're going to look at unseen poetry, but I thought I'd quickly just rattle through that, just because I haven't rattled through it before. Do you have to learn all the poems off by heart? If you can recite them, that would be amazing, but usually people choose to pick a few key quotations from each one and learn those quotations. The more the better, but it is really overwhelming, and you've got, what, 10, 11 other GCSEs to do. So do what works for you. Emma, a girl from my class thought we had to answer both for either or. Yeah, that's a really easy mistake to make. So you're only answering one question, and they are giving you, they're giving you a choice. So make sure you make the choice and don't answer both. And she dropped 2 grades because of it. Yeah. So be careful. It's an easy mistake to make in life generally, but when you're in an exam period and you're sat there, even worse. So what was a good technique you used to remember these? Right, so I sat the old syllabuses, so I didn't get numbers at my GCSE, I got letters, and I sat an open book, which meant that I had all of the text in front of me. So I had a book of The Great Gatsby. It was a clean copy, it wasn't annotated. I had all of the poems in front of me. I did learn quotations because you know, actually trying to find a decent quotation for what you want to say is difficult when you've got 120 pages in front of you. Excuse me. I can't really remember, so I think I'm one of these people that when I have exams and when I revise, I just write and write and write stuff over and over again until it goes into my head. Then I use stuff like Quizlet, which I think is really good, which I haven't used with you guys, but you can make loads of match-up activities with that, do sort of fun games individually, whereas things like Kahoot and Mentimeter are really sort of for a group thing. So Quizlet, I think, for individual is the place to go. I made flashcards. I had posters all over my wall, that sort of stuff. And when I got up in the morning and when I was getting ready, I would, you know, when I was doing my hair, back when I used to do my hair, I would look at, I sort of have something next to my mirror, so I was sort of reading over stuff whilst I was doing whatever I was doing. Right, let's get cracking, because I feel like, yeah, Slido 2 doesn't work as an individual. It is really lucky, yeah. So I feel incredibly sorry for you guys, because I find it stressful enough when I had the text in front of me. So yeah, I'm not a fan. Right, okay, let's look at autumn then. Autumn arrives, so let's get my pen out, let's get cracking. So generally alliteration to start off with, like an experienced bank robber. So we've got a simile. Grabbing the green stuff. What does grabbing the green stuff mean? So we've got personification, because obviously autumn cannot grab. And we've got some more alliteration. Thinking I might, oh, money, it's not money, it's leaves. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the chat open there. Yeah, the green of summer, so that's referring to leaves. So we've sort of got a little metaphor here. This is a really nice compact poem, but there's so much in it. The cunning covering his, then cunningly covering his tracks. So again, we've got some more alliteration there. I'm just going to leave it with that. So just all and then a dot. Cunningly, what animal do we usually use for cunningly? What animal would we refer to as being cunning? A fox, thank you, Jania. Lovely stuff. Yeah, so which links back to nature, doesn't it? Ruralness. Yeah, Zima, I think you could say a lion or a tiger, because I think they are probably quite cunning. But generally we refer to foxes as being cunning. I don't know why, but we do. Right, with a deep multitude of colourful distractions. So that's really nice. There isn't anything particularly exciting there apart from imagery, I think. Could the red on the last sentence? Emma's always ahead of me. You're always so quick. Right. I'll answer it when I get there. Right. And the wind. The wind is his accomplice. So we've got repetition of wind. So we've got a load of pathetic fallacy going on. So I'm going to leave the chat open for the time being, because I know I asked you guys a lot of stuff, save me clicking backwards and forwards. So if you're sticking stuff in the Q&A and you... Right. Okay, so I'm assuming the two of you, so Saeem and whoever is decided to be anonymous, the chat is purely, as much as it's nice that you guys are talking to each other and asking what you were doing, it is not appropriate, and you shouldn't be doing it. Basically, so I've had a little chat with Bonner about this when we had last week, when we had that little issue with Slido, and if things continue and if you're sort of disruptive in some way, then we can remove you from the webinar, which we don't want to do. So yeah, just be considerate, use it for what it's there for, please. Right, so you've sent me another message. I still haven't had it. I'm really sorry. I've checked everything this morning and I haven't had it. If you're having problems, give MyTutor a call, so ring the office, or use the chat function on the website and they will get you in touch with me, because I have had one student do it that way. Right, okay, so getting back to it, in terms of raising hands, I can't let you guys sort of pop on, so if you have got any questions, stick them in the chat. Right, the wind is his accomplice. Yeah, calling the wind an accomplice again. So we've got a metaphor, and now we've sort of got this semantic field of crime coming in. So we've got experienced robber, and we've got accomplice. The wind is his accomplice, putting an air of chaos into the careful diversions. So it's like autumn and the season, autumn and winter coming together and sort of ruining everybody's happiness. Into careful diversions, so branches shake. So we've also almost got some sibilants going on there. And dead leaves are suddenly blown in the faces of inquisitive strangers. So what does inquisitive mean? So that's sort of a sense of attack there going on, that imagery. So what does inquisitive mean? I suppose we could say that these might be victims and they are innocent and they're sort of being battered by these leaves. Yeah, Amani, sorry. Inquisitive is sort of curious, absolutely. So I think Mr. Bowles hates autumn, otherwise he wouldn't put autumn under a negative light. Yeah, it's incredibly negative, isn't it? I really love autumn, but I think this is a really interesting twist on it. I don't know whether he's written it just because he wanted to be controversial and shocking. I don't know. Perhaps he does feel like that. Who knows? Right, the theft chills the world. So we've got a hyperbole there. So the theft of the leaves doesn't chill the entire world, does it? At least not at the same time, because different countries go through different seasons at different times. Who is Alan Bowles? I'll be honest with you, I didn't look him up, and I should have done. So I don't know anything about him at all. You usually get slightly obscure poets for the unseen, but definitely go have a look. I didn't look it up because with the unseen poetry, you literally just get given the poem and that's it. So you wouldn't know any background information about it. Pathetic fallacy. Pathetic fallacy is where the weather reflects mood. So the entirety about this is weather and the mood. It's sort of the weather is reflecting the mood that Bold really doesn't like autumn. Essentially, they're almost really intertwined. Deep multitudes showing the negative of beauty. Yeah, absolutely. Sir Giles said he died 22 years ago. Changes the temper of the earth. So again, we've got some personification going on down there. So a hyperbole is an exaggeration. Semantic field. So a semantic field is a group of words that belong in a category. So sort of how I explain semantic fields is, so imagine you've got a filing cabinet or a load of folders. So for example, let's say this folder is about nature, right? So in our mind, we have a folder called nature. Inside that folder, hiding my clients' names, we have sheets of paper, an individual, we might have summer, and we would have all the words that we associate with summer. That would be one thing. Then we might have all the things associated with winter, all the words associated with winter. Then we might have something like holidays and the how nature affects those, so things like Christmas, what we expect nature to look like then. So that sort of thing, essentially. Right, so colourful juxtaposes the crime of evil of nature. That's fabulous, Emma. Hadn't even thought of that. Absolutely. So juxtaposition of sort of good and bad. That's really nice. So change the temper of the earth till the normally placid sky glows red with a quiet rage. So, fab. So Scottish born poet. Yeah. Okay, so placid. What does placid mean? And then Emma's already told me about glows red with quiet rage, and someone has said something else about quiet rage. Quiet rage. Oxymoron. Yeah, absolutely. So an oxymoron is two words that are next to each other which have opposite meanings. And where is it? Emma got in so quickly. The red of the last sentence of the poem shows danger, fear. Yeah, absolutely. So we could say the red has connotations. of danger. So usually red has two different types. So on the one side you have things like danger, so stop signs, red traffic lights, warning signs all have red on them usually. So for example on here, if I want to stop sharing my screen, that button is in red. And then the other one is sort of having a sexuality side to it, so sort of red lips, sort of the colour red, and if you're wearing a red dress seems to sort of have sort of like sultry undertones, you see that sort of thing. I think, is it Curly's wife in Of Mice and Men always has red fingernails, that sort of thing. Not so much of a thing anymore, but it definitely used to be. I've closed the chat, I don't know why I did that. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Placid means calm, chilled eye, sort of just go with the flow. Red, also wintriness, the autumn leaves, red pigment. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Janina. Yeah, it's been a while since I've read Of Mice and Men, so she is obsessed with red. So she's portrayed in quite a sexually derogatory way, hence why sort of that red's being significant, because at the time that Of Mice and Men was being written, that was quite a common thing. You know, red was a terrible colour, and you have things like the red light district, which is where you call sort of where prostitutes congregate. I don't know too much about it, but red light districts, that would link to sexuality as well. What is a pass class in higher English, right? So it's really confusing. So there's just a pass and then there's a good pass. So a pass is a 4. If you get a 4, great. And then they've sort of separated it to be a good pass, which is a 5, but a pass is a 4. Right. Could the change from placid show what change autumn has created? Yeah, and now it's chaotic. Yeah, so we could have sort of juxtaposed emotions. Fabulous, guys. Really impressed. So let's move on to today. Oh, also talk about the form. Can anyone tell me what the form is? Is there any rhythm? Is there any rhyme? I've closed the chat again. I'm useless, aren't I? Right. Just double checking. No, there isn't any rhyme. So that might be to represent the chaos that autumn is creating. That's a potential interpretation. And it's, yeah, brilliant, Sir Joe. It's a free verse. Yeah, there's no real structure to it. All the lines are as long or as short as he wants to be. You're not sort of having so many syllables, and you're having stressed and then unstressed, stressed and unstressed. Are really complicated, difficult things to do as a poet, to do well. Yeah, so I'd say free verse. There's a lot of enjambment in here. I'm just see if there's, I don't think there is any caesuras. Don't think there is. But there is a lot of enjambment, which would suggest how chaotic it is as well. Maybe you could draw those two in together. Hyperbole, I think I mentioned it, but I'll say it again. So a hyperbole is an exaggeration. So for example, me and my partner call my dog a big scary bear. My dog is a Yorkshire Terrier, and she's really small and placid and really chill and is not scary in the slightest, but we call her a big scary bear because she's really fluffy, and she likes to have the odd growl and play occasionally. So that's what a hyperbole is, exaggerating something. She's tiny. A caesura, right, let me spell caesura for you. That's how you spell caesura. So caesura is where you have a stop in the middle of a sentence, so a full stop usually in the middle of a sentence, so you're breaking the flow. So that's what that means. How can I remove people when it's anonymous? I don't know, but I've been told that I can. I assume that we can sort of identify you. I don't know. Did quite a few people from the webinar start tuition with you? Just wondering. I've had 2 people, so not a lot. Most people just find me through the website generally. Fab. Right. Let's move on. Stop switching poem showing chaos. Yep. Right. Let's have a look. See, I think enjambment I think in this case is really messy because none of the lines are really equal. It's all sort of all over the place. And I think he's done that intentionally. Let's have a look at today. Right, so if ever there were a spring day so perfect, so uplifted by a warm intermittent breeze. So what does intermittent mean? It's my first question. Let's go for a different colour. Let's go for purple. Right, so if is what we call a conditional clause. So that means so there is a condition. So there has to be a spring day. If there isn't a spring day, then there's no consequence, essentially. Intermittent, random, irregular. I'd say intermittent being sort of stopping and starting. So, for example, my mum has a essential oils diffuser, and it has an intermittent setting. So it will diffuse for 10 seconds, and it will stop for 10 seconds, then it will diffuse for 10 seconds. Sort of like doing couch to 5K, where you sort of run for 2 minutes and you walk for a minute, that sort of thing. Right, so uplifted by a warm intermittent breeze. So we haven't got any rhyming going on there, but we've got a lot of positive vocab. It's very contrasting with the autumn, isn't it? Immediately, it's a completely different atmosphere. That it made you want to throw. So we've got direct address. Open all the windows in the house. So throw, I think, is quite not a violent verb, but could potentially cause a problem. Like if you did it too enthusiastically. Yeah, fab Olivia. Olivia's already got there before I have. So this sort of sense of renewal here, and new life, and unlatch the door to the canary's cage. So we've got alliteration there, and I think that conveys a sense of freedom. And by having a bird rather than, I don't know, rabbit, it gives that sense of freedom, like spreading your wings. Oh, Emma, the 2 lines for the poems for each paragraph. So remember, stanzas, not paragraphs for poetry, could show set structure for spring. Absolutely. And I suppose that we always know it's going to happen, and the sorts of things that are going to change. So crocuses and daffodils and bluebells, those sorts that sort of spring up right at the beginning. And sort of the greenery coming back in, that sort of thing, and sort of associating things with new life, so chicks and lambs, that sort of thing. Right, indeed, rip the little door from its jam. So again, I think this verb is quite dramatic. So jam is the sides of a doorway or opening. Yeah, I think I've said direct address, which is like talking to you, doesn't it? So it's involving you as the audience, assuming that everybody feels the same way. A day when the cool brick paths and the gardens bursting with peonies. So again, there's a load of imagery here. So peonies are a type of flower. They're really gorgeous. Bursting, I think, is a really nice use of a verb there. Seemed so etched in the sunlight that you felt like taking. So we've got loads of enjambment going here. There's absolutely masses of it. Over stanzas as well, which is even more interesting. So it's almost like there is a set structure, but at the same time there's this rush and excitement, and the sense of renewal, the sense of life, the sense of gratefulness. Reminds you of William Blake. Interesting. I'm trying to think. London, I don't think it's like that, but I'm thinking the odd sort of other poems. are like that. He has written some poems with a similar sort of style. Why is it when you want one you can never find it? Anyway, it's not helpful at the moment. Right, okay. So a hammer to the glass paperweight. So this is saying let's break open this paperweight. We've got taking their hammer, so sort of being so excited that you seem to want to break everything, which is sort of very frantic. Olivia, enjambment when you end a stanza without punctuation. It's just when you end a line without any punctuation, it runs straight on. So for example, the second stanza, that it made you want to throw open all the windows in the house, and then that goes over into the next stanza as well, and unlatch the door to the canary cage, then we get a comma. So we've got 3 lines all run into each other. Theme of chaos is a happy chaos, isn't it? It's really joyful. It's almost like a kid waking up on Christmas morning. It's really wired. Releasing the inhabitants from their snow-covered village here. So this is personifying a snow globe and the little characters inside them, sort of releasing them from the winter and going out into the spring, into the wild, enjoying all the nature, which they obviously can't do because it's a snow globe. So there's sort of a sense of entrapment there. Cover cottage you could potentially have as alliteration, but it's not particularly exciting. So they could walk out again. We've got personifying going on here. Holding hands, alliteration, but again not particularly exciting. And squinting. So squinting there we could assume is from the sunlight, the change. So when you open your curtains at the beginning of the morning, and it makes me feel dreadful anyway, into his larger dome of blue and white, into this larger dome of blue and white. So that's a metaphor there. So that is a metaphor for the world, the earth, the sky. Well, today is just that kind of day. So we end with a full stop. So this last line is almost like a little bit of a conclusion. So that's really interesting as well. Fab. Right, Emma, adjective etched, usually meaning engraving on an object showing how spring is etched onto flowers so that we know when spring is here we see flowers. Yeah, absolutely. That's really nice, Emma. Thank you. Have I missed anything? I think I pretty much picked up everything on the way. To me, it sounds like a speech. Yeah, I think you could say that. I think there's definitely some, because there's that little bit of direct address in it. I think it's almost sort of like preaching in a way about how wonderful the world is. So definitely I think you could talk about stuff like that. Right, I was going to model my answer, but I got too excited about annotating, so I'll read it out to you guys. So this is our question. In both Today and Autumn, the speaker describes attitudes towards the seasons. What are the similarities and or differences between the poets the ways the poets present these attitudes? So I'm just going to flick back over to Mentimeter. So looking at themes for this sort of thing is a really good idea. Right, so both talking about nature, I'd say we could talk about the pain and suffering in one, and sort of that contrasting with gratefulness and excitement. We could talk about crime and sort of a sense of loss, and sort of how excited about the world the other poem is. So you could tie loads of these themes in, essentially. Right, okay. So, Olivia, what kind of things make examiners want to give some extra marks for things that make them say why? Really in-depth analysis and in providing alternative interpretations, I think, is what gets you the really big marks. Taking things further, thinking a little bit outside the box, not just writing a bog standard analysis, essentially. Be creative, provide the obvious answer, but then perhaps provide an alternative as well. I think that's where you get your big marks with your poetry, thinking a little bit outside the box. And if you can talk about form and structure as well, generally students struggle to talk about form and structure, and I think if you do a good job of form and structure, there's no sort of, you get more marks for doing form and structure rather than if you look at language devices. There's no sort of hierarchy, they're all equal, but I think form and structure is a little bit more difficult to do. So I think generally it would impress the examiner a little bit more. when you go to your one, can you grade how many marks it would give? Yeah, so right, here we go. So in the poem Autumn, the speaker describes the change of seasons incredibly negatively. Autumn arrives like an experienced robber. This simile creates negative imagery in the reader's mind, as the connotations of crime leads us to believe that autumn is selfish and uncaring. This perspective is almost opposed by today, as the speaker is welcoming the season change. If ever there were such a spring day so perfect. The adjective perfect has connotations of completeness and unfaltering beauty. This opinion very much juxtaposes the feeling of autumn. So this is where I'm really bringing the two together. However, one could argue that the difference in seasons could affect the positivity of the poet's writing. So that's sort of my little bit of, that's my little gem there at the end, which is a little bit more out of the box. Bold continues to use the extended metaphor of the robber to express his distaste. So I didn't actually mention extended metaphor. So extended metaphor is where you continue to use the metaphor over a long period of time. So we had the semantic field of crime, accomplice, that sort of thing, and it keeps cropping up. Right. Express his distaste. The theft chills the world. This hyperbole suggests that the metaphorical figure brings pain and suffering to the entire population of the world. However, Collins demonstrates the themes of joy and gratefulness in his poem. Unlatch the door of the canary cage. This shows a sense of freedom and euphoria as the speaker greets the season. Despite such joy being presented, there is a semantic field of recklessness, throw and rip. These verbs seem to show the readiness of the speaker to be destructive in order to express his joy with little thought of the consequences. So again, that's my little bit further analysis. So getting your odd gem in there where you're taking it further rather than saying this verb means this and this makes the reader feel this because. Do that as your starting base, then take it even further. The potential implications of why it's there, how you feel, that sort of thing. Right, okay, I will pop the Kahoot up for you guys. So it is some feature spotting on everything that we have looked at today. So just the 10 questions. So I've just given you examples from the text. Chat, let's get rid of the chat. I'm also you can hear the music. Pop that in the chat for you. Doesn't Bob seem like he's speaking in his own opinion? Yeah, I've just gone for the speaker generally because you can't say for or against that, but you could definitely talk about that. It's objective, that it's subjective rather, not objective. Different atmosphere, we know in set structure, autumn is set in one stanza, little punctuation. Got 9 couplets with pauses, a lot of punctuation showing autumn is continuous, where spring feels quite quick. Yeah, that's beautiful, Emma, and that would be really great if you expanded on that and wrote that really nicely out in the exam. I would be super impressed with that analysis. Not that I'm an examiner. Right. If you want me to turn the music off, that is absolutely fine. I'll plug it back in and turn it off. Or there we go. Right, that's okay if you guys don't want it on. That's fine by me. Right, I'll get cracking with this then because we haven't got too long. So, autumn arrives like an experienced robber is an example of what? I really don't like it without music. Yeah, simile, well done. Can I put it on a little bit just because it makes... The adverb cunningly is usually attributed to which animal? Right. There we go. It's as quiet as it can be. Fox. Brilliant. The wind is his accomplice is an example of what? Thank you. I've only put it on a little bit. It's just because I feel like I'm just sat here silently watching you guys, and I feel like it's really tense. Metaphor. Yeah, brilliant. So the wind isn't actually his accomplice, is he? The wind can't be an accomplice. What does inquisitive mean? Let's get my books ready. Fabulous. Cracking stuff so far, guys. Putting an air of chaos is an example of what? You know what? I hadn't even noticed people using rude names on Kahoot. It's a shame. Brilliant. What are peonies? Fabulous. Into this large dome of blue and white is an example of. Metaphor. Oh, most of you have gone for hyperbole. So, See, I think sort of large dome of blue and white. I think that we do say the world is a large dome of blue and white. I think we could say that, but perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps you guys should have had that one. Snow-covered cottages. I didn't mention this one. You're on your own. An example of what? Assonance, yet, so the repetition of the vowel sound. For that one, are we on the last one? Almost. 9 out of 10. Holding hands is an example of what? Yeah, brilliant. Alliteration. It's not particularly exciting. Last one, if ever there were a day so perfect. It's an example of what? Got this in and it's not even plugged in. Look like a right Wally. Conditional clause. Yeah, brilliant. Number 3. Well done, engineer. Number 2. And number 1. I don't even know how you say that. Spobber? No, SS Bobber? Anyway, well done, guys. Really impressed. Right. Book recommendations then. So yesterday some of you asked, what should I be reading? What is a good thing to read? So I've brought some suggestions up with me this morning. So fiction. I've picked out some which I think are sort of relevant for your age, might push you a little bit. So Animal Farm, I really like, is on the GCSE syllabus. So I think sort of your first port of call, if you're not sure what to read and you want something challenging, go have a look at the GCSE syllabuses and choose one of the books that that you are not studying. So Animal Farm, really love that one. 1984, also George Orwell, that's an A-level text on the literature, but I think sort of reading at your age is fine. Same goes for The Handmaid's Tale, A-level text, but again, I love this. This is one of my favourite books. And The Testaments came out last year, which I've got and haven't got around to reading yet. So that will be read at some point this year, hopefully. The Girl on the Train. This is a little bit of a thriller. This has been made into a film, and I think it's a 15. So at the older end, so if you're sort of like going into year 11 or are year 11. I think this is quite a nice one if you like that sort of thing. The other one, which is aimed at your age group, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, I read I think when I was 17. This is fab. It's a really great book. It's a sort of coming of age story, but there is themes of sort of depression. I can't remember whether there's a little bit of self-harm in it or not, but there's sort of like sexual abuse is sort of discussed vaguely in it. So if any of those things sort of trigger you, then I wouldn't suggest that book. But generally, I think it's really good. And the other one was The Colour Purple, which is an A-level text, and really nice if you're wanting to read some fiction to sort of diversify your reading list from a different culture. That one's really nice. So let's just see what you guys have popped up. And fabulous. Right. So non-fiction quickly then. So most of my non-fiction is either geeky stuff or true crime. I'm not going to tell you to go read some true crime because I'm not sure you should be at your age, but I picked a few bits out. So this is really brilliant. So this is A History of Britain in 21 Women by Jenny Murray, and which is a bit battered, and this is where I read about Mary Seacole. She's in there from checking out my history. There's loads of cracking women in here. So it goes off to, it starts with Boadicea, Queen Elizabeth I, who else we got in here? Jane Austen, Emmeline Pankhurst, so those are good. And then this one, which I read when I was at college, is fabulous, Everyday Sexism by Laura Bates. And there's loads of stuff, sort of, it started off as a blog, the sort of general encounters that people had which were sort of sexist, and she turned it into a book. She's written another book called Girl Up, but that's a bit more sort of sarcastic and a little bit rude, so I haven't brought that one up to suggest. But this one I think is super interesting. I loved it. It's got chapters on women in politics, Silence Women, The Invisible Problem, motherhood, what about the men, women under threat, people standing up. It's really interesting and really eye-opening. Really do recommend that one if you're looking for some feminism literature. Then my English related ones. So if you want to go find out a little bit more about Shakespeare, Bill Bryson's Shakespeare, which is a biography. Really good. I think it's nice and light and easy to read, so definitely recommend that one. Then if you're interested in looking at English language at A level, then I would recommend perhaps having a look at some of these books. Oh, I've got something gross on the front of that one. What is that? Mark Forsyth, he's brilliant. So the Horologicon and the Etymologicon. So that's about words with hidden connections, where words came from. And this one is a jaunt through the English language. This is super clever. So it starts off with one word and then goes into another. It's in different sections. Really good. He's written another book as well. It's got a green cover, which I'm sort of halfway through, which is good as well. And Each Susan Leaves, which is by Lynn Truss, which is all about the problems with spelling, punctuation and grammar, and what we need to do and what we should be doing. And I find this genuinely really helpful. So I read this before coming to uni because I was never really overtly taught that much grammar. So if you want to learn and make sure that your grammar's okay, she's a good one to go for. So that is all my recommendations for that. Right, the other thing I was going to show you quickly, I appreciate that we're running out of time. So these are things I've just ordered from Waterstones to diversify my reading list, read a bit more into sort of Black Lives Matter movements. So I've chosen Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. That seems to be a really popular one. I picked up this one, which was First They Killed My Father. A Daughter of Cambodia Remembers. I think this one might be a little bit too much for you guys, but that is to do with the Cambodian Civil War, which is referenced in War Photographer Phnom Penh. So hence why I picked that one up. Queenie, which is a fiction one, but again, Black author. The Hate You Give. So this is one that I think is sort of more young adult, sort of teenage one. which I had sort of recommended for teenage reading not so long ago, so I've picked that one up. Body in the Library is just Agatha Christie. I fancy one of those. So if you want to read any crime which is sort of steady and isn't really gruesome, Agatha Christie, good one to go for. And Noughts and Crosses as well, which tackles some racism in there as well. So those are what I've chosen, what I've picked up. Oh, and I've got Girl, Woman, Other as well. I spent far too much money, but hey, it's books. I feel like I can justify it. Right, okay, thank you very much for coming, guys, as usual. Oh, would you read The Colour Purple in Year 9? I'd say not. I think you need to be a little bit older for Colour Purple. There's a lot of sort of I think there's some sexual references in it, and it's quite it's a challenging read. So thank you very much for coming. As always, you can go over to YouTube afterwards and watch what I've put up. You can also get in contact with any of us on MyTutor in terms of getting private tuition. We are changing what we are doing next week, so I'm going to hand over to Bola, who will explain that a little bit for you guys, because she can explain it better than I can, I'm sure. Bola, can you pop on for me quickly, please, just to explain what's happening next week in the change? Right, I think we might have some muting issues, so I will do my best to explain. So as of next week, I think we are going from one lesson a day at 2 to 3 p.m. So you guys will be seeing me if you come back once a week at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday. And I think we're looking at War Photographer next week. Right, okay, thank you so much for coming, guys. Sorry for running over a little bit. Hopefully I've given you some food for thought in terms of what you could be reading at the moment. And I will see you all next Wednesday. Have a fantastic week. Make sure you all look after yourselves. See you Wednesday. Bye.